This is The Catholic Current with Father Robert McTeigue.
Has the present time lost touch with the heroic archetype? What's going on here?
The short form, Father, is that the country that I grew up in as a kid were the children of John Wayne and Gary Cooper, and now we're looking at the children of Jon Stewart and Michael Moore. I remember when Michael Moore was very, very big, I remember asking myself, would Michael Moore ever get into a trench with a rifle and die for anything he believed in? It's inconceivable. No. But people who have a sense of righteousness will do that.
Praise be Jesus Christ. This is Father Robert McTeigue of the Society of Jesus, your daily host for the Catholic Current, where we bring Christ to the world and the world to Christ. You're listening to us from the Station of the Cross Studios, your local radio station and the iCatholic Radio mobile app, where we proclaim the fullness of truth with clarity and charity. As always, let's start with prayer. In the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Almighty God, through the intercession of St. Ignatius Loyola, we ask that you pour forth your Holy Spirit upon us, a spirit of discernment, that may hear your voice and obey your command. In the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Well, friends, I've been following politics for going on about 40 years now. And it seems that every time there are Supreme Court nominations, it gets uglier and uglier and more contentious. I think the dam broke with Robert Bork, even more so with Clarence Thomas, and it's been a runaway train ever since. How and why is this happening? To help us answer this question, we have with us a guest. He is the founder and president of the Article 3 Project. They support constitutionalist judges. He's former chief counsel for nominations to the Senate Judiciary Committee, and he also served as a law clerk for Justice Neil Gorsuch. Mike Davis, welcome to the Catholic Current.
Thank you for having me on, Father.
Mike, I'm sure you've heard the old joke about the two things you don't want to see being made are sausages and legislation. I would add academic personnel decisions, because I'm a recovering university professor. Could it be true that the other thing you don't want to see being made are Supreme Court nominations? Is it really that ugly?
Well, it's gotten that ugly, unfortunately, and you talked about how that goes back to Judge Bork's failed nomination to the Supreme Court more than 30 years ago when President Reagan nominated him. You saw this with President H.W. Bush nominating Clarence Thomas and how nasty that was. Fortunately, Justice Thomas got through, but it's just continued. And I think the problem is that people have a fundamental misunderstanding of the role of a federal judge. Constitutionalists, conservatives like me, think that judges have a modest but critical role, and that is to decide cases and controversies between two parties and say what the law is. And liberal judicial activists think of judges as people who are supposed to remake society and do the heavy lifting that they can't get their elected representatives in Congress to do.
Right. Yeah, it seems to me that there's been a trend towards the Supreme Court in particular being kind of the super final legislative body. I'm going to draw an analogy here. When you take currency off the gold standard, there's a limited amount of gold, which means there's a limited amount that you can spend. Once you take a currency off the gold standard, you can spend a whole lot until you can't. Likewise, if you go with the original intent of the framers of the Constitution, there are some things you can do. There are a lot of things you can't. If you wave your magic wand and announce that the Constitution is a living document, you can find all sorts of rights in there that nobody heard of five years ago. And again, you can do that until you can't do that anymore, because eventually you hit the wall of absurdity. Is that a fair comparison on your view?
It is. I mean, if you have to look at what our Constitution is, our Constitution, the U.S. Constitution, is a loan agreement between we the people and our governments. We the people loan the federal government specific, enumerated, and separated powers. In exchange, the government is supposed to secure our rights and liberties. Notice how I didn't say give us rights and liberties.
Right.
We are different from the English system where we came. In England, God gives power to the sovereign king or queen, and then the king or queen loans rights and privileges to his or her subjects through documents like the Magna Carta. The American Constitution is radical in the sense, radical at the time in the sense that it was completely different. We, the people, are the sovereign. We get our power, we get our rights from God, and we loan specific enumerated and separated powers to government, right? And so if the federal government doesn't have a power in the Constitution, it belongs to the states and the people, as confirmed by the 10th Amendment to the Constitution. But starting about 90 years ago, when FDR threatened to pack the court, the switch in time that saved 9, we have seen liberal judicial activists flip that on its head, turn our Constitution really from a shield into a sword to give government these virtually unlimited powers unless the Constitution specifically says that the government doesn't have that power. Hopefully, with these new constitutionalist justices on the Supreme Court appointed by President Trump, Justices Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, and Barrett, along with the near record-breaking number of federal circuit judges that President Trump appointed to the critically important federal courts of appeals, the regional courts of appeals around the country that are the last stop for more than 99% of appeals. Hopefully we'll start seeing that change, and I think it's going to be a 20-year project.
Friends, we're speaking today with Mike Davis. He's founder and president of the Article 3 Project. We're talking about how Supreme Court justices are made. Mike, I come to this as a former university professor, as a Catholic priest. And when the scripture says, put not your trust in princes, that says, all right, it's not my place to be a partisan for one party or office holder or another. I will say this much. I do recognize the philosophical distinction between originalists, those who recognize that the Constitution has meaning that was invested by the authors, and that meaning has been tested and confirmed over time, and the living document hype, which is we'll just make stuff up as we see fit. Is it not the case that if you've got the law as a living document, eventually it means nothing at all? Right? I mean, the whole idea of the rule of law begins to go away if the document is something that whose meaning can be changed depending upon who's reading it.
Yeah, and we saw that vividly with the Supreme Court's catastrophic decision in Roe versus Wade nearly 50 years ago, where you had 7 out of the 9 unelected, lifetime appointed, undemocratically appointed on purpose. We have a Supreme Court that's not democratically elected on purpose because their job is to protect minority rights, protect us from government tyranny, from majority tyranny. You had these 7 judges again turn the Constitution on its head and decree 49 years ago that there is somehow this constitutional coddling or protection of the abortion industry, and it therefore should be very, very, very difficult for any states to regulate the abortion industry like the states regulate every other aspect of healthcare and just about every other industry in America. Again, 7 unelected, lifetime appointed judges just made up this right, and it's very anti-democratic because it took the abortion regulations out of the democratic process with the 50 states and had these, 5 federal judges on the Supreme Court make these decisions for the whole country.
Right, and I can't help but notice in the aftermath of the Dobbs decision, very many states jumped on the opportunity to put non-trivial restrictions on abortion. It does seem to be that if you're going to be taking democracy seriously, federalism is the way to go, letting people decide. Now, I tend to be more of a maximalist on the life issues, and I would have liked to have seen the 14th Amendment used as the term of analysis, so we wouldn't be voting on which of our children we could kill. But I guess we're not there just yet. I think that the reverberations from Dobbs haven't been fully revealed yet, that we're going to be talking about this for years. What are your thoughts on this?
I think Dobbs is a monumental decision. It's one of the most important decisions that the Supreme Court has made, up there with Brown versus Board of Education, Marbury versus Madison. It restores our constitutional order, and it's going to save tens of millions of unborn babies from being murdered in the womb up until the moment of birth in many instances. And I would say I agree with you that abortion is wrong. It's a sin. You're taking an unborn baby, the most vulnerable among us. But I would say in the meantime, we have to have a culture of life in America where we have to convince state legislatures to put restrictions on abortions with the goal of eliminating abortion in this country. And that includes, you have to do it through the democratic process. We live in a republic, so we have 50 laboratories of democracy in the states. And our next step, our next phase here is to win hearts and minds in these states and create a culture of life. And so we can pass these abortion regulations, abortion restrictions in the states through the democratic process, through our elected state representatives.
And meanwhile, we have to show the lie for what it is, that people who are pro-life are only pro-birth and abandon women and children in distress. I mean, certainly the Catholic Church is leading the way in addressing not only the material and emotional needs, but the spiritual and social needs of women and children in distress. And that's why it's so ironic that the pro-choice people are now firebombing pregnancy crisis centers. Friends, when we come back, we're going to continue our conversation with Mike Davis. He's founder and president of the Article 3 Project. We're talking about how Supreme Court justices are made. In the next segment, we're going to walk through the nomination process step by step. Remember, our rallying cry here at the Catholic Current is Christus Mundum, Mundus Christo, bringing Christ to the world and the world to Christ. We do it because our Lord says so, for the greater glory of God, the love of our neighbor, and the salvation of our own soul. After the broadcast today, go to thestationofthecross.com, get our resources list, download our audio as podcast. Everything you need to take this conversation to your family and friends, we give to you. Together, let's take it around the world. We'll be back in just 2 minutes. Please do stay with us. This is Jesuit Father Robert McTeigue, your dearly host of the Catholic Current. Join me on Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern for another round of Let's Talk About This, when you and I walk through a complex issue together. I'm going to tackle this question: why do we celebrate abnormality? Friends, we need a healthy culture, or else. So join me on the Catholic Current Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern, coming to you from the Station of the Cross and the iCatholic Radio mobile app.
You're listening to the Catholic Current with Father Robert McTeigue from the Station of the Cross Catholic Media Network. Stay connected with the show, our guests and topics, by following the show on Twitter and Gab. Just search for The Catholic Current.
Praise be Jesus Christ. This is Father Robert McTeigue of the Society of Jesus, your daily host for the Catholic Current, where we bring Christ to the world and the world to Christ. You're listening to us from the Station of the Cross Studios, your local radio station, and the iCatholic Radio mobile app, where we proclaim the fullness of truth with clarity and charity. We're talking about how Supreme Court justices are made. My guest today is Mike Davis. He's founder and president of the Article 3 Project and was chief counsel for nominations to the Senate Judiciary Committee. So he really saw Supreme Court justices being made. Mike, I do want to get into that process step by step. I think you were as close to it as anyone who's not a member of the Senate. But a clarification, you gave an interview the other day in response to some senators, I think Susan Collins of Maine in particular, who said that different justices lied under oath about their attitude towards Roe versus Wade and precedent. You offered a correction. Could you fill us in on that, please?
Yeah, so Senator Susan Collins and I think Lisa Murkowski made a similar allegation that Justices Gorsuch and Kavanaugh promised to follow precedent during their Senate confirmation processes, and so therefore the fact that they voted to overturn Roe versus Wade and Planned Parenthood versus Casey and Dobbs was that they were misrepresenting or even lying, that they would follow precedent. And that just shows that these senators did not do their homework and they have a fundamental misunderstanding of the law of precedent. Justice Gorsuch actually helped write the book on precedent with a bunch of other federal judges about a decade ago. And when you follow the law of precedent, you have to look at the case, you have to look at the precedent, and there are numerous factors that you consider under the law of precedent to determine, A, whether it's still right as a matter of law, how it was decided before, and B, if you overturn it, what ramifications? What are the repercussions of overturning that precedent? And that is the law of precedent. So every judge who goes through this process follows precedent. They follow the judicial canons, and it is actually illegal for a federal judicial nominee, especially a sitting federal judge, to go into a senator's back office and promise that judge's vote on a future case for that senator's confirmation vote. That is not the type of country we live in. We're not a banana republic. Imagine if you were one of these parties in this Supreme Court case. Imagine if you were that coach praying on the field in the religious liberty case. And it didn't matter what the facts were. It didn't matter what the law was, because that Supreme Court nominee promised his vote in your case 4 years prior to that. That's just nonsense. And I think Senators Collins and Murkowski need to cool their rhetoric.
I don't know very much about the background of either of those senators, but my understanding, the majority of the members of Congress are lawyers. They went to law school. They studied the Constitution. It would be like a cleric giving very foolish moral advice. You'd begin to wonder where they studied theology, or if they had forgotten what they once said under oath that they believed. But that's another topic for another time, so I'm going to discreetly walk away from that soapbox. Let's get into the process itself. A space opens up. There's all sorts of speculation. There's an announcement at the White House. The judge is there with family. There's a lot of pictures taking, and then the speculation begins in earnest. I just have to imagine people stampede to the back rooms with drawn knives. How far am I off from that view?
Well, I don't think it's too far off, Father. I will say I've worked on I've worked on 5 of the 6. I wasn't old enough for Justice Clarence Thomas. I have worked on 5 of the 6 Republican-appointed justices to the Supreme Court, and I worked on many of the courts of appeals and district court and other lower court judges. I worked on the Chief Justices and Justice Alito's confirmation efforts when I worked in the Bush 43 White House as a junior White House aide. I worked in the Justice Department Office of Legal Policy, the office that is tasked with vetting and preparing and advocating for judicial nominees who go through the process. I worked as Justice Gorsuch's outside leader for his confirmation as one of his former law clerks, and then I worked on I was the Senate staff leader for Justice Kavanaugh's Supreme Court confirmation, and then I run the Article 3 Project, a conservative nonprofit that advocates for conservative judges, and as part of that, I helped out with Justice Barrett's confirmation from the outside. So I've seen this from all sides, from all angles, and under our Constitution, the president nominates federal judges, including Supreme Court justices. These are lifetime appointed positions, and they are pay protected. So they have a job for the rest of their life if they're confirmed, and you can't lower their pay or take away their pay. Those are 2 issues that are protected by the Constitution. And the reason we do that is to insulate them from politics. So they can make tough decisions, so they can protect us from government tyranny and majority tyranny, protect minority rights. Brown versus Board of Education was not popular nearly 60 years ago, but the Supreme Court certainly did the right thing by getting rid of Jim Crow segregation, especially in schools. So how the process works is the president consults with senators and others before he makes a nomination on a judge. He works with the White House counsel's office, various other White House offices like legislative affairs, political affairs, public affairs, the Office of Legal Policy at the Justice Department, the Attorney General's office. There are many people in the executive branch who are involved in vetting, choosing, preparing this nominee. And then once that decision is made, the nomination is sent to the Senate, and it is referred to the Senate Judiciary Committee for full vetting. And I'll tell you, as someone who worked on these judicial nominees at the Senate Judiciary Committee, including for a Republican president with the Republican Senate, President Trump's nominees, we were not a rubber stamp. We thoroughly vetted these nominees. We dug through everything they've written publicly or said publicly their entire adult lives. We go through their academic records. We look at their FBI background investigations where they've talked to their friends, family, neighbors, classmates. We do our own separate vetting of their character and fitness to serve. We We get paperwork submitted before their hearing that we review, a lot of paperwork. We go through all of that at their public hearing so that the president makes the nomination. It's submitted to the Senate. Generally, you wait at least a month before you hold the hearing, and that's to make sure that all the paperwork gets in and people have an opportunity to review that paperwork before they have the hearing so you can prepare for the hearing. And then there's a hearing. For Supreme Court nominees, it's just that Supreme Court nominee, and this hearing lasts for 3-4 days. The nominee generally goes for 3 days, and then they have character witnesses, both people who support the nominee and people who oppose the nominee on the fourth day. And as anyone who has seen these hearings, they get grilled. They do opening statements for the senators on the first day, where the senators bloviate and make their political statements for the first for a half hour each, and then the nominee at the end of the day makes his or her opening statement. And then the next day, that nominee goes 30-minute rounds with, there are currently 22 senators on the Senate Judiciary Committee, so you're doing 30 minutes times 22. And then the second day, it's 20 minutes times 22. And it can go even longer than that if you want. There's the public hearing that happens. Before the hearing, the Senate staff, I was the staff leader for this, you call the nominee and grill them on private matters related to their finances or questions that you just want answered that you don't necessarily want to embarrass the nominee in public. So, personal finance or family matters, issues like that. And then after the hearing, the senators go into a closed session after the public hearing and grill the nominee about their backgrounds. And then there are questions for the record, written questions submitted to the nominee after the hearing, and that nominee has, less than a week to answer hundreds of questions, and then it goes to committee votes, and then you have a committee hearing where they debate the nomination, and then they have another committee hearing where they debate it further and then vote on the nomination, and then it goes to the Senate floor. And then you have to invoke cloture, and that's Senate swamp speak for you have to cut off debate to 30 hours. Then there's 30 hours of debate, then you have a confirmation vote. And then once there's a confirmation vote, there's still not a justice, as we saw with Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson's confirmation. She got confirmed in March, but she wasn't a justice until just recently, like 5 days ago, because you're not a justice until the president signs the commission and delivers the commission, and then they swear. The Supreme Court justice have to take 2 oaths, the constitutional oath and the Supreme Court judicial oath, before they become a justice. So it's quite a process that you go through, and it's rigorous.
Yes, it is. Friends, I'm speaking today with Mike Davis. He's founder and president of the Article 3 Project and former chief counsel for nominations for the Senate Judiciary Committee. We're talking about how Supreme Court justices are made. At least historically, there were times when, way back in the day, that, you were nominated and confirmed very quickly in a matter of just a couple of days. Maybe that's when the Supreme Court fit in the original packaging that it came in with the Constitution. But all these hearings, et cetera, is it really just show trial? Is this for, I'm a senator, I'm on the Judiciary Committee, I've got an election in the fall, I've got to have my sound bites for my commercial. Is anyone's mind really changed by the hearings?
Well, you could have people who are undecided, but it's largely a political process. It's a political process by design. You have the political branches picking these nominees, and then another political branch, the Senate, confirming these nominees. But it shouldn't be as political as it is. And the reason it has become so political is what you said before, Father. The Supreme Court, unfortunately, has become a super legislature where it's these unelected, lifetime appointed, pay-protected, politically unaccountable Supreme Court justices have too much power over our lives. They decide too many issues. So it used to be back, 100 years ago, that the federal government had these limited powers, and whatever powers were not specifically enumerated in the Constitution for the federal government belonged to the states and the people. That got turned on its head. And then you have where all these powers are consolidated, where you have these legislative powers that are the most dangerous power. The legislative power is supposed to be diffused between the House and the Senate, and 535 elected representatives gets rolled up that legislative power gets rolled up into these government agencies where they have legislative, executive, and judicial power all wrapped up into the one, and then these courts are essentially the administrative state, these unconstitutional government bodies that have too much power, and the Supreme Court says yes or no, whether they can do things or they can't, or they just do these grand pronouncements like they did 49 years ago that they're somehow in the penumbras and emanations of 4 constitutional amendments, somehow for 200 years these federal judges didn't find this mention of abortion, let alone this right to abortion in the Constitution.
And they discover it, I think, by standing on one foot and closing one eye. Friends, when we come back, we're going to continue our conversation with Mike Davis of the Article 3 Project. We're talking about how Supreme Court justices are made. In the next segment, we're going to talk about what did we learn about the Supreme Court and America in light of the Dobbs decision. After the broadcast today, go to thestationofthecross.com, get our resources list, download our audio as podcasts. Wherever you can find audio, you can find us. Follow us on your favorite platform. Write a 5-star review. We need to attract the attention of the algorithms so that these conversations get the attention they deserve. Take this to your family and friends. Together we'll take it around the world. Let's do it together. Back in 2 minutes. Please do stay with us.
This is The Catholic Current from the Station of the Cross Catholic Media Network. Catch up on an episode you've missed or share them with your family or friends. The Catholic Current is podcasted wherever you enjoy listening. Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, and the iCatholic Radio mobile app.
Praise be Jesus Christ. This is Father Robert McTeigue of the Society of Jesus, your daily host for the Catholic Current, where we bring Christ to the world and the world to Christ. You're listening to us from the Station of the Cross Studios, your local radio station, and the iCatholic Radio mobile app, where we proclaim the fullness of truth with clarity and charity. We're talking about how Supreme Court justices are made. My expert guest is Mike Davis, founder and president of the Article 3 Project and former chief counsel for nominations to the Senate Judiciary Committee. Mike, I want to draw a religious analogy, which you'd expect from a priest. You know, when St. Joseph and Mary brought the Christ child to the temple for dedication, the prophet Simeon said that the child would be destined for the rise and fall of many, and the thoughts of many would be revealed. I would say that since the Dobbs decision, the thoughts of many have been revealed. Among them is the misunderstanding of the Constitution, and some of our senators, the unbridled enthusiasm for people murdering their own children conveniently among a lot of the people who were screaming into the cameras on social media, and a lot of pro-life people just saying, oh my gosh, it actually happened. Now what? But let's go back to before the release of the decision. The leak of Justice Alito's draft, certainly unprecedented. Were you astounded by that? And do we have any good reason to ascertain why the leaker hasn't been identified at this late date?
So, yeah, I'm not stunned by much, Father, but that actually stunned me. I was a law clerk for Justice Gorsuch, as you said, and in order for 9 Supreme Court justices and their 4 law clerks each to be able to get these majority concurring and dissenting opinion drafts circulated and finalized and out the door by around July 1st, they have to be able to collaborate. They have to be able to communicate with each other. And this is unprecedented, what you said. When Roe versus Wade was decided nearly 50 years ago, the results of the decision leaked, like the day of the decision, it leaked out, but it wouldn't have changed anything because the decision was already coming out. It wasn't a draft decision. This is completely unprecedented for a draft to come out over 2 months before the final decision was supposed to come out. This is a draft that was supposed to circulate among the justices, and for this to leak is stunning to me. And to me, it shows, I think, my theory is that it was a law clerk for one of the 3 liberal justices, so one of those 12 law clerks for the 3 liberal justices who thought that they were going to either going to get a justice on the fence to switch their vote, be cowed into switching their vote, or if they couldn't get a justice to switch their vote, to say, to heck with it, we're just going to burn down the institution. But it was a very, very bad decision for this law clerk to make. It was, to me, it was clearly a law clerk, because in the news piece, in the Politico news piece, there were actually 3 leaks. There was a leak of the draft decision. Along with that leak came the internal deliberations and analysis that only a justice or the law clerk would know. And then there was a follow-up leak after that with the internal deliberations and analysis. So my strong suspicion, it was a law clerk for one of the 3 liberal justices who wanted to get maybe a Justice Kavanaugh to switch their vote and not overturn Roe versus Wade.
I find that astonishing. I mean, it's such a grotesque breach of public trust, and I know we would enter into the realm of speculation to wonder why. This isn't an investigation through the Pentagon where there are tens of thousands of people. It's just a handful of people in this building, and I just find this surpassing strange that they haven't been able to identify the source of the leak. But we'll leave that aside for now. I think we also saw revealed in the Senate and now with a lot of the population at large, they really don't know what the Supreme Court is supposed to be doing. They don't understand how the Constitution works. You're an attorney. Do you begin to wonder, what have we been teaching people for the past 20 or 30 years in schools, that this judicial procedure is so grossly misunderstood?
Well, I think the biggest problem, Father, frankly, is the public education system in America has been destroyed by leftists. They don't want to teach patriotism in America. They don't even want to teach basic American civics. They want to brainwash. They want to trap these kids, oftentimes poor minority kids, in these failed government schools with these teachers' unions who want to coddle the teachers and not actually teach the kids. For 2 years of COVID, they even closed down these schools. So the most vulnerable kids among us couldn't even get into school when they needed it. So they're subjected to, being 2 years behind in school, and they're already several years behind in school, and the abuse, neglect that they get. And when they go into school now, they're being brainwashed with, BLM, Antifa, and other Marxist tactics, instead of learning about America and civics and how our Constitution is supposed to work and how our government is supposed to work. We have a big societal problem, and I don't know how we fix it. I mean, we have to fix it, but part of it has to be, we need to end the education monopoly in this country so kids have a choice. My parents worked in low-income public schools, but they sent their own kids to Catholic schools, and I'm glad they did this. So I got perspective from all sides, but we have to fix our education system in this country. And hopefully with the Supreme Court decision upholding Maine's school choice program for parents sending their kids to any private school they want, including Catholic and other religious schools, I think that's going to be a step in the right direction.
Friends, we're speaking today with Mike Davis, president of the Article 3 Project. We're talking about how Supreme Court justices are made, especially in the aftermath of the Dobbs decision. Mike, would it be fair to say that we're in uncharted territory? I mean, we've lived in the shadow of Roe for 49 years. It's not clear what's coming next. I know that there's been a lot of fundraising that say that because of Dobbs, everything that you hold dear, gay marriage, contraception, interracial marriage, nearly anything that you can think of is absolutely at risk. And, women haters like Amy Coney Barrett and white nationalists like Clarence Thomas are coming for your cherished rights. And people seem to be believing that. What disturbs me even more is people who hold elected office, who took oaths of office to uphold and defend the Constitution, are saying really frightful, ugly, histrionic things about the Constitution, about the courts. I'm disappointed with the public education system, too. Should we be at least as bothered by what elected officials are saying?
Absolutely. We had Senator Chuck Schumer, the top Democrat in the Senate going to the steps of the Supreme Court in 2020 and threatening Justices Gorsuch and Kavanaugh by name if they didn't rule Schumer's way on a pending abortion case. We have people, the Democrats, the left, loved the Supreme Court for 90 years because they controlled it with their liberal judicial activists, and they lost control of that with President Trump appointing Justices Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, and Barrett. So now the left want to burn the place down. This is not your this is not your grandparents or your parents' Democrat Party like mine were. My parents and my grandparents were Democrats because they believed in equality. They believed in due process. They were patriotic Americans. They just disagreed with Republicans on how to get there. This is not today's Democrat Party. They are leftists. They are Marxists, and they hate America. They hate due process. They hate equality. They want to destroy America and replace America with their utopian vision. And we've seen throughout human history with 100 million deaths that Marxism is no utopia. And so my former boss, Justice Gorsuch, wrote a book, and I'm going to plug his book. He didn't tell me to do this, but I encourage people to go buy his book or go get it at a library. It's called A Republic If You Can Keep It. It goes back to our founding fathers. They talked about, we have this republic, but it doesn't just run on its own. These kids, we need to create a culture of life. We need to have people involved in school boards. We need to educate the next generation about civics and how our republic works. We have to be active citizens in America, active participants in our democracy and our republic, or we're going to lose it. And people need to get out of their comfort zone and start being active members of society, active participants in the American democratic experience.
Well, when I was teaching, I've taught medical ethics for many years, and I would tell my students, we're only as safe as the most vulnerable member of our society. And if you can rationalize the death of any one innocent person, then you can rationalize the death of anyone at all. And, we've got 63 million dead bodies behind us that, we have to come to terms with. And people talk about what America's original sin is. I think what our current sin is our illusion that we can have an anti-life culture and still be safe and dignified and build a moral house in which we would want to live. Mike, I've heard that there's been pushback in some states with state courts holding back abortion restrictions. Present occupants of the White House say they can fix this either with executive order or tinkering with some of the rules in the Senate. How secure is the Dobbs decision right now?
Well, it's as secure as the Democrats deciding that they want to nuke a legislative filibuster in the Senate, meaning they want to lower the vote threshold from 60 to a mere majority vote, which they can do tomorrow if they wanted to. The House passes an abortion bill. The Senate passes an abortion bill. The president signs an abortion bill legalizing abortion across the country, and then they can pack the Supreme Court. We've had 9 justices on the Supreme Court since 1869, right after the Civil War. FDR tried to pack the court. He was unsuccessful in packing the court, meaning adding justices to the Supreme Court to get through his New Deal programs, but the effect of the threat was to get the Supreme Court to couch at the switch in time that saved 9, that brought us to this monstrosity of the federal government. Now, we could very easily lose it all. And that is why it is so important for Catholics and other believers to get out and participate in society, especially to vote this November for constitutionalist candidates who understand and respect our American republic and understand that the federal judiciary has a modest but critical role, and that is to protect us from government overreach, from tyranny, and from government tyranny and majority tyranny. And it is so important because we could lose everything. This is not our parents and our grandparents' Democrat Party we're dealing with anymore. These people, there are too many people on the left who hate America and everything we stand for.
Mike, what I see here, and again, I've been watching politics for a long time now. Politics does have a very important role to play, but eventually we have to start changing minds and hearts. We have to start changing the culture, regardless of what the law says or doesn't say. I want to live in a society where the thought of murdering your own children is itself unthinkable. I want to live in a culture where actresses don't clutch their golden idols at their awards ceremony and talk about how this was only possible because they had a series of abortion, and then them getting, screams and cheers and rounds of applause. I don't want to live in that world anymore. And so, you have your work to do in the public forum with nuts and bolts and legislation and judges and people who dress like me in the sin fighter suits. We have our work to do from the pulpit and from the microphone, trying to form consciences properly so that we have a culture of life that knows that human life is sacred from conception to natural death. Friends, when we come back, we're going to continue our conversation with Mike Davis of the Article 3 Project. We're talking about how Supreme Court justices are made. The next time, we're going to talk about what will the next Supreme Court justice nomination process look like. Be part of the conversation. Follow what we're following by following us on Gab. That's gab.com. The channel is The Catholic Current. After the broadcast today, go to thestationofthecross.com, get our resources list, download our audio podcast. Take this conversation to your family and friends. Together we'll take it around the world. We can do it with you. We can't do it without you. Let's get started today. Be back in 2 minutes. Please do stay with us.
There's no better way to start your day than with spiritual formation from inspiring priests.
Patriotism is a virtue that was allied to the old virtue of the Greeks and Latin called pietas. Pietas meant love of God, love of neighbor, love of country. And when one goes out, all go out.
That's Sermons for Everyday Living, weekdays from 6 to 7 a.m. Eastern on the Station of the Cross.
After today's broadcast, go to the Catholic Current show page on thestationofthecross.com for info on today's guests, the show resource links, and to sign up for our weekly email of upcoming shows.
Praise be Jesus Christ. This is Father Robert McTeigue of the Society of Jesus, your daily host for the Catholic Current, where we bring Christ to the world and the world to Christ. You're listening to us from the Station of the Cross Studios, your local radio station, and the iCatholic Radio mobile app, where we proclaim the fullness of truth with clarity and charity. We're talking about how Supreme Court justices are made. My guest today is Mike Davis, founder and president of the Article 3 Project. Mike, eventually there'll be a time when a president will have to nominate another justice to the Supreme Court. I'm trying to imagine what will be different. Up until last week, the absolute knockdown, drag-out litmus test was Roe versus Wade. You're supporting abortion rights or you're not. Is it going to be something new? Is the litmus test? Will the litmus test go away? Or will the test be, are you going to bring back Roe or not? What do you think is going to happen?
So I think the abortion industry provides so much financial support to Democrat campaigns and causes. There's going to be constant pressure from the Democrats, from the left, to bring back Roe and to do everything they can to have this government-sponsored monopoly for Planned Parenthood and the abortion industry, because that's how they make their money. They make their money off of the ease of vulnerable mothers going in and killing their unborn kids. That's how Planned Parenthood and the abortion industry makes their monopolistic money, and then they give the proceeds to Democrat campaigns and causes to protect their government-sponsored monopoly. So I do think that's always going to be an issue for Democrats. I think another important issue is that we need to start looking at how do we dismantle the administrative state. If our founders came to America today and saw all these three-letter agencies in Washington, D.C., and how they have consumed so much power over everyday Americans' lives, I think they would be appalled. This is not what the founders intended. This is not what the Constitution envisions. And I hope that I hope we have politicians who will find the backbone, find the courage to start taking on this overreach. We saw this during COVID, how these unelected bureaucrats, nameless, faceless bureaucrats, and the CDC can close down our schools. They can censor us on big tech platforms if we even dared to question the science.
And they close down churches too. I hasten to add.
Closed down churches. Told people they couldn't get communion. I mean, it's just let our parents and grandparents die alone in the hospital. It's truly sick what happened to America over the last 2 years of COVID, because people got scared and they couldn't find the courage to push back. And, I blame that on the politicians who lead us, but I also blame that on us as a people for allowing this to happen.
Mike, I want to follow up on the idea of rolling back on the administrative state, because that's certainly a favorite hobby horse of mine. There was a decision recently about limiting the reach of the EPA, which has been celebrated as a first big pushback against the administrative state. Could you fill us in on that, please? We've got about 4 minutes left.
In this EPA case that just came out, the Supreme Court looked at the statutes that enabled the EPA to do the things that the EPA thinks that it has the constitutional power to do. And the Supreme Court says, wait, Congress never delegated to you, EPA, that you have these broad powers to regulate all aspects of our lives as it relates to air quality. So therefore, you don't have these powers. And so what you're going to start to see for the first time in 90 years is you're going to start to see a federal judiciary transformed by President Trump and Senate Republicans actually holding these government agencies within their constitutional lanes. And if they don't have power delegated from Congress, they don't have that power. I would argue that these executive branch agencies don't have any legislative power. That belongs to Congress, and they don't have any power to adjudicate cases. That belongs to the federal judiciary. They only have executive power, and I would even take it one step farther. I believe they only have executive power that's specifically enumerated in the Constitution. So, again, that's a 20-year project. But in the meantime, this EPA case is a very important first step, because giving all these powers, legislative, judicial, and executive powers, to unaccountable, unnamed, faceless bureaucrats in the administrative state is the very definition of tyranny.
It's a lot like the Soviet Union. The members of the Politburo came and went, but the apparatchiks were forever. And they were the ones who really had the reins of power. I mean, it seems to me that if I were a lazy legislator, I would delegate absolutely everything to these bureaucracies and agencies, and so that I can bloviate right before election, but then not take responsibility for anything in particular. And then so that, because a legislator who's disappointing to the electorate becomes a lightning rod for the electorate. When you've got that power diffused over this metastasized bureaucracy, there's no single point to begin to push against. I also think it's noteworthy, too, that with the recent Second Amendment case and again with Dobbs, there are a lot of states' attorneys general said, we're just not going to enforce the law. That doesn't bode well for the rule of law, does it?
No, it doesn't. They take an oath, and they're violating their oaths, both to the U.S. Constitution and their state constitution, by refusing to enforce the law. Just imagine if they said that we don't like the Supreme Court's decision in Brown versus Board of Education desegregating our schools and ending Jim Crow segregation in America. We just don't like that, so we're just not going to enforce the law. That's just not how it works in this country, and those people should be thrown out of office, whether it's through impeachment or by their voters.
Yes, I think that we have to be really clear about what government is for. And I think that between the Dobbs decision and people who've taken public oaths of office to defend the Constitution, dismissing the Constitution, and again also the nameless, faceless bureaucrats telling me as a priest that the worship of the living God was not essential, but things that were taxable like liquor stores, pot stores, and of course abortion services, they were essential. I don't know how you perform an abortion and maintain social distancing. That aspect was never named clear. Mike, we've got about a minute left. Are there cases that you're watching for the next term for the Supreme Court that we should be keeping an eye on?
A big case that's coming out is the Supreme Court, I think, is finally going to end this racial discrimination called affirmative action in this country, that we need to start looking at people in a colorblind society and not treating people favorably or unfavorably based upon their skin color. We should treat people people equally in this country based upon their merits. Maybe they need some help based upon their background, but it shouldn't be based upon race. And I think the Supreme Court is going to finally do that. I would say this, that the D.C. swamp seems to be the only place in the world where the reptiles lack backbones. And I hope that politicians and judges in D.C. will finally start to find their backbones in the coming years, because we're going to lose our country if they don't.
Well, Mike, I hope that you're right. I hope that people will reread the Constitution and realize the brilliance of it. And I'll point out that the aftermath of the American Revolution was the Constitutional Convention, and the aftermath of the French Revolution was known as the Terror. And the terror is actually the default value. We have to opt in for liberty and for a federal republic. Mike Davis, president of the Article 3 Project, thank you for a fascinating conversation. I look forward to the next one.
Thank you, Father.
I'm Jesuit Father Robert McTeigue, your host here every day at the Catholic Current. You want to join us on Friday? It's another round of Let's Talk About This, you and I walking through a complex issue together. I'm going to ask this question: why celebrate abnormality? Think about that question and then make sure you take notes when I give my answer tomorrow. After the broadcast today, go to thestationofthecross.com, get our resources list, download our Audio S podcast. Take this conversation to your family and friends, and together we'll take it around the world. Through the intercession of Our Lady of Mount Carmel, may mighty God bless you. Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, go in peace, and please do pray for me.
Thank you for listening to this podcast brought to you by thestationofthecross.com, a listener-funded nonprofit organization. Please prayerfully consider donating at thestationofthecross.com by calling 1-877-888-6279 or through our free iCatholic Radio mobile app.